Welcome to what I hope will be a soothing journey, a quiet exploration into the vast, interconnected tapestry of human history. Here in the twilight glow, we shall uncover forgotten stories, not to stir excitement, but to offer a calm perspective on how our world came to be. For tonight, we begin a grand narrative, one woven with silk and spice and carried on the backs of camels across arid lands. Imagine, if you will, a time many centuries ago. A world far less connected than our own, yet yearning for distant luxuries and exotic wonders. To truly understand the story of global trade, we must first turn our gaze to a legend, a pathway that echoes through time, the Silk Road. It wasn't a single paved road, you see, but a sprawling network, a circulatory system of routes stretching from the vibrant heart of China, weaving its way through mountains and deserts, and finally reaching the distant shores of the Mediterranean. This great artery of commerce began to truly flourish around 130 years before the Common Era, under the watchful eye of China's Han Dynasty. It was a time when empires expanded, not only through conquest but through curiosity, a desire for what lay beyond their borders. The Silk Road, in essence, transformed ancient commerce. It allowed goods, and perhaps more importantly, ideas, to traverse continents, creating a web of political and economic interaction that shaped civilizations for centuries. Of all the treasures that traveled this serpentine path, one stands out above all others, lending its very name to the root: silk. From China, this wondrous fabric, shimmering and soft, became a global symbol of wealth and status. The Romans, far to the west, were utterly captivated by it, exchanging vast quantities of gold for this luxurious textile. But the road carried far more than just silk. Picture caravans laden with fragrant spices from distant lands, delicate textiles, glinting precious metals like gold and silver, and the prized jade, each item a whisper of its origin, a testament to the world's diverse riches. And as these caravans slowly moved across the landscape, they fostered something remarkable: the birth and blossoming of vibrant caravan cities. Places like Samarkand and Bukhara, once nomadic outposts, swelled into flourishing economic and cultural hubs. They became crossroads where languages mingled, where deals were struck under the desert sun, and where the pulse of the ancient world could truly be felt. Indeed, the very essence of the Silk Road was this exchange, this constant, gentle flow, shaping not just markets, but the very fabric of human experience. Rome's thirsty desire. Now the phrase Silk Road, it conjures images of one grand, dusty highway stretching across continents, doesn't it? But you see, that's a romanticized notion. In truth, the Silk Road was never a single, clearly marked path. Imagine, if you will, a vast, intricate tapestry woven from countless threads, some thick and well-trodden, others faint and meandering. It was a sprawling network of routes, both overland and by sea, that quietly, patiently, connected the distant corners of the ancient world for centuries. While the name itself, coined by a German geographer in the 1870s, points to silk, and indeed Chinese silk was an immensely prized commodity, this network was a conduit for so much more. It was a living, breathing artery for ideas, for cultures, for technologies, and yes, unfortunately, for diseases too. Consider the sheer scale of it all. From the heart of China, these threads stretched westward, through the rugged terrains of Central Asia, across the vast plains of Persia, and all the way to the bustling markets of the Mediterranean. A journey that could take months, if not years, in those bygone eras. And then there were the maritime routes, extending from the South China Sea, across the Indian Ocean, reaching the shores of Basra or Suez. These sea lanes, too, played an indispensable role, complementing the overland journeys. What's truly fascinating is how this intricate system wasn't static. It breathed, it shifted, it adapted over time, influenced by the ebb and flow of empires, the whispers of changing climates, and the constant dance of supply and demand. The political landscape played a significant part, of course. Periods of stability, like the Pax Sinica under Chinese dynasties or the later Pax Mongolica, often meant safer passage for merchants, and thus a flourishing of trade. But times of unrest, well, they forced routes to change, for new paths to be discovered, showcasing the resilience and ingenuity of those who dared to traverse these challenging terrains. This wasn't merely about exchanging goods, you see. It was about cultures colliding, blending, and sometimes creating something entirely new. Think of the caravan cities that blossomed along these routes, places like Samarkand and Bukhara. These weren't just stops for weary travelers. They were vibrant hubs, melting pots where languages intertwined, philosophies were debated, and artistic styles merged, leaving behind a rich legacy that still resonates through time. East meets West. So how did this ancient world, thirsting for the exotic, actually manage to connect across such immense distances? You see, the Silk Road wasn't merely a single, well-trodden path. Imagine, if you will, not a single highway, but a vast, intricate tapestry of routes, intertwining threads of earth and water that stretched across continents. It was a complex web created organically over centuries, linking the mighty Han Dynasty in China all the way across Central Asia to the Mediterranean, and ultimately to the very gates of Rome itself. This grand exchange truly began to flourish around 130 BC, under the watchful eye of the Han Dynasty. What's often overlooked, however, is that while this era marked a significant intensification, the quiet echoes of trade had been carried on earlier, in what we now understand as the Bronze and Early Iron Ages. This network wasn't a sudden invention, but a slow, steady evolution, shaped by the ebb and flow of empires and the tireless spirit of countless merchants. What makes this truly fascinating is the interplay of necessities and desires. The Roman Empire, as we discussed, yearned for luxurious silks. China, on the other hand, had a surprising craving for something quite different: horses. Not just any horses, mind you, but the powerful, swift steeds from Central Asia, crucial for their military might against the nomadic warriors of the steppes. This dynamic need, silk flowing west, horses flowing east, created a powerful impetus for trade, driving expeditions, and fostering connections. But the Silk Road was far more than just a conduit for goods. Consider the cities that blossomed along its routes, places like Samarkand and Bukhara, which began as mere watering holes for caravans, but grew into vibrant centers of culture, learning, and immense wealth. These were not just stops, they were crucibles where ideas, technologies, and beliefs mingled and transformed. It's here in these bustling caravanserai that the true magic of the Silk Road unfolded, creating a constant, quiet hum of exchange that shaped not just economies, but entire civilizations. The silk spread story. Indeed, as these ancient paths began to weave across continents, they created a fascinating duality, a network of physical roots, and an invisible current carrying something far more profound than mere commodities. It was a silent, insistent flow of ideas, of knowledge, and of beliefs that would forever change the human tapestry. Imagine, if you will, the quiet rustle of parchment, the murmur of prayers, and the hushed exchange of ancient wisdom. Along with the silks and spices, the horses and the porcelain traveled stories. Philosophies, even entire cosmologies. From India, the gentle teachings of Buddhism began their long journey eastward, finding fertile ground in Central Asia and eventually flourishing in China, transforming societies as they went. It wasn't a forceful imposition, you see, but a quiet, almost osmotic process, much like water seeping through porous rock. What's particularly interesting is how this exchange wasn't limited to the spiritual. Practical knowledge, too, found its way across the vast distances. Consider the Chinese invention of paper, for instance, a seemingly simple material that would revolutionize the spread of information. Reaching Samarkand in the 8th century and then eventually Europe, it paved the way for something truly transformative, the printing press, and with it an explosion of literacy and learning. Or think of gunpowder, another Chinese innovation, which would fundamentally alter the art of warfare around the globe. The compass guiding ships across uncharted seas, enabling the great age of exploration. These weren't just objects, they were seeds of change, carried in the saddlebags of merchants and the minds of scholars. The flourishing cities along the Silk Road, places like Samarkand and Bukhara, which shimmered as oases of culture and commerce, became vibrant melting pots. Here, languages mingled, artistic styles converged, and new ways of thought were born. A Persian artistic motif might inspire a Chinese artisan, while Indian philosophical concepts resonated with Greek thinkers. It was a grand synthesis. A quiet alchemy of human ingenuity, happening across thousands of miles and many centuries. Yet this intricate web of connection also carried a shadow. With the flow of people and goods came the unintended passage of diseases. The most tragic example, perhaps, was the Black Death, which tragically swept along these very trade routes in the 14th century, leaving an indelible mark on civilizations. It reminds us, perhaps, that even in the grandest designs of human connection, there are often unforeseen ripples. This continuous, silent exchange, the constant blending of East and West, laid the very foundations for what we now understand as a globalized world. It is a testament, indeed, to the enduring power of trade, not just as an economic engine, but as a profound force for cultural transformation. Hidden paths, secret goods. Indeed, this vast network, perhaps best described as the roads of silk rather than a singular road, wasn't just a conduit for these valuable textiles. It was a pulsating artery through which flowed far more than just luxury goods. Imagine, if you will, a great ancient river system, its tributaries reaching out across continents, carrying not water but the very essence of human ingenuity and spiritual longing. What truly transformed this ancient global economy, you see, was the sheer breadth of exchange. Beyond the shimmering silk from the east, a kaleidoscope of treasures made their long, arduous journeys. From the shimmering deserts came precious spices, potent ginger and cinnamon, fragrant cloves and nutmeg from the distant tropical lands of India and Southeast Asia. These weren't mere flavorings, they were medicines, preservatives, perfumes, and potent symbols of wealth and status. Think of the deep, rich hues of lapis lazuli, mined from the mountains of Afghanistan, journeying to adorn the palaces of emperors, or the precious jade from China, meticulously carved into objects of profound spiritual significance. And it was not only the tangible, the material riches, but also the intangible, the whisper of new ideas, the quiet revolution of nascent technologies, and the profound solace of burgeoning faiths. Consider the spread of papermaking, a Chinese invention, traveling westward along these very same routes. Its journey, slow and deliberate, stretched over centuries. From China it reached the skilled artisans of Samarkand, revolutionizing record-keeping and scholarship in the Islamic world, before eventually finding its way into medieval Europe, laying the very groundwork for the Renaissance itself. The compass, too, another quiet marvel from China, made its slow migration, forever altering the course of maritime navigation and, by extension, the very trajectory of global exploration. Perhaps most profoundly, these ancient highways facilitated the gentle flow of spiritual currents. Buddhism, originating in India, began its westward journey along these routes, finding fertile ground in Central Asia and eventually permeating the vastness of China. Later, Islam from the Arabian Peninsula followed similar paths, carried by merchants, mystics, and scholars, establishing new cultural and intellectual centers like Baghdad, which would shine as beacons of learning during its golden age. It was a constant, subtle braiding of cultures, where philosophical ideas intermingled, shaping new ways of perceiving the world, and it was amidst this rich tapestry of exchange that something truly remarkable began to emerge. The very definition of what constituted a valuable commodity was about to broaden, far beyond anything that had come before. Spices, a world awakened. The trade along these hidden paths, these secret conduits we've just touched upon, it was foundational, but what precisely was being moved? Along these ancient arteries, the answer, you see, is far more than mere goods. It was a grand exchange, a silent conversation across continents, carried on the backs of camels and in the hearts of intrepid merchants. Think of the very name, the Silk Road. It evokes a singular image, doesn't it? The shimmering, luxurious fabric. Spun from the cocoons of silkworms, a secret jealously guarded by the Chinese for centuries. Indeed, this exquisite material was often the most prized possession, a symbol of wealth and status that journeyed from the Far East to grace the elite of Rome. It was so valuable, perhaps, that the Romans at one point were said to export a staggering amount of gold just to acquire it, but silk, while paramount, was merely one thread in this vast, intricate tapestry of exchange. From the distant lands of India and Southeast Asia came the exotic allure of spices. Imagine the pepper, the cinnamon, the cloves. Each tiny granule a burst of flavor, a whisper of distant lands, traveling thousands of miles to transform the mundane into the magnificent. These weren't just culinary enhancements, they were perceived as medicine, as perfumes, as treasures. And then there was porcelain, that delicate yet remarkably strong white gold, a testament to Chinese craftsmanship, eventually inspiring attempts at replication and artistic innovation across Persia and Europe. But the flow was never one-sided. To China from Central Asia came the magnificent. Incredibly swift horses, vital for the defense and expansion of empires, and even more surprisingly perhaps were items like grapes, which led to the discovery that wine could be made from something other than rice. From beyond the western reaches, woolen goods, carpets, and tapestries, entirely new to Chinese eyes, astonished those who encountered them. This movement of goods, it fostered much more than economic prosperity. It birthed flourishing caravan cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, vibrant oases where languages mingled, where cultures converged, and where the pulse of ancient globalization beat. These were not just stops along a route, they were crucial hubs, melting pots where the wealth of materials met the richness of human interaction. What's truly interesting, you see, is how even simple, everyday items like cotton textiles, once exclusive to India, permeated societies, influencing fashion and home decor across vast distances. And it was here, amidst this bustling exchange, that the seeds were sown for the next great journey. A journey not of silk or spices, but of something even more subtle, yet profoundly impactful, porcelain's silent journey into the heart of the world. Porcelain's silent journey. From the fragrant world of spices, we now turn our gaze to another commodity that, in its quiet way, shaped the vast networks of the Silk Road, something far more subtle, yet profoundly influential: ideas. You see, the Silk Road was never merely a conduit for physical goods. It was a grand, invisible river carrying the currents of human thought, technology, and faith across continents. Imagine, if you will, the desert winds carrying not just grains of sand, but whispers of how to make paper, or the distant thunder of a new cannon being fired. These weren't commodities you could weigh or count in a merchant's ledger, but their impact was, perchance, even greater than any caravan laden with silk or gold. Think of paper itself. Invented in China as early as the 2nd century, this seemingly simple innovation would utterly transform the world. Before paper, records were kept on cumbersome scrolls of silk or on heavy bamboo slips. Imagine the sheer volume of such materials needed to document an empire, or even a single library. When the technology for making paper eventually traveled west, reaching the Islamic world by the 8th century and Europe by the 13th, it didn't just change how people wrote, it changed what they could write, how widely knowledge could spread, and eventually it paved the way for the printing press. It was a revolution carried silently, sheet by sheet, across immense distances. Then there were the grand narratives of faith. Buddhism, for instance, a philosophical and religious tradition born in India, journeyed along these very same routes, carried by monks, merchants, and missionaries. It traversed mountains and deserts, finding fertile ground in Central Asia and eventually flourishing in China, where it intertwined with existing philosophies like Confucianism and Taoism. What's fascinating is how these ideas were not simply adopted whole. They adapted, blended, and evolved, creating rich, new cultural tapestries wherever they took root. Similarly, Islam, emerging in the 7th century, expanded its reach along the Silk Road, bringing with it not only a new religion, but also advancements in science, medicine, and mathematics that would profoundly influence the world. Cities like Baghdad became vibrant centers of learning, drawing scholars and ideas from every corner of the known world. Even something as devastating as the Black Death, which swept across Eurasia in the mid-14th century, was a testament to the interconnectedness fostered by these roots. While a tragic consequence, it underscores a crucial truth. When paths of trade are established, they become arteries for everything, both beneficial and at times calamitous. The Silk Road, then, was this incredible, sprawling laboratory of human interaction. A place where progress and peril walked hand in hand. Horses, engines of empire. Indeed, much like porcelain, other tangible goods painted a vivid picture of this ancient interconnectedness. What was exchanged might seem simple to our modern eyes, but each item carried immense value, both economic and cultural. Take, for instance, spices. From the distant lands of India and Southeast Asia, pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves embarked on arduous journeys westward. These weren't merely flavor enhancers, they were a form of currency, a symbol of status, and often critically important for food preservation in an age before refrigeration. Imagine the tantalizing aromas reaching a distant market. A whisper of far-off lands carried on the desert winds. Think of the intricate tapestry and wool products from Persia and Central Asia. While China was a master of silk, the techniques for processing wool and creating those magnificent carpets were quite different. These textiles, with their vibrant dyes and complex patterns, were highly prized in the East. They spoke of a different artistry, a different way of life. And seeing them would have been a revelation for those accustomed only to silk. Then there were the precious metals and gemstones. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, jade from China, turquoise from Persia, and rubies from Burma. These weren't just adornments. They were often believed to possess spiritual power or to be talismans of protection. Their journey across the Silk Road spurred incredible artistic innovations, as craftsmen in places like Samarkand and Kashgar developed unique jewelry traditions inspired by the materials flowing in from every direction. What's particularly fascinating is how even everyday items like tea became a powerful cultural force. Cultivated in China since the Tang Dynasty, tea didn't just stay there. It traveled to Tibet, Mongolia, and Central Asia, becoming a staple in nomadic communities. Imagine a hot cup of tea in the endless expanse of the steppe, a simple comfort that knitted communities together, fostering unique rituals and traditions. It's a testament to how even the smallest of goods could deeply reshape daily life and cultural identity. Each item, whether it was a delicate piece of porcelain, a pungent spice, a shimmering gem, or a warming cup of tea, carried with it a story of its origin, a story of its travel, and eventually, a story of its new home and the people whose lives it touched. These were not just transactions, but threads in the vast, intricate tapestry of human connection. Ideas travel far. From the thundering hooves of horses, our journey now turns to the quiet, yet profound exchange of ideas and beliefs across vast distances. You see, the Silk Road was never merely a conduit for physical goods, for silk and spices, or indeed for horses. It was a grand tapestry woven also with the threads of human thought and spiritual longing. Imagine the caravan, laden with precious commodities, moving slowly across the arid plains. With each step, the merchants and travelers carried not only their wares, but also their unique perspectives, their stories, their very understanding of the universe. This intimate, continuous mingling along the routes meant that knowledge, innovations, and spiritual practices could diffuse across continents, much like ripples expanding across a placid pond. One of the most profound spiritual journeys along the Silk Road was that of Buddhism. Born in India, this philosophy of inner peace and enlightenment embarked on its own westward journey, finding fertile ground in Central Asia and eventually in China. Monks traveling alongside merchants carried sacred texts, statues, and the very essence of their faith. What's truly remarkable is how it adapted and intertwined with existing cultural traditions in these new lands, creating vibrant, localized forms of expression. Then there were the technological marvels. Chinese innovations, such as the art of papermaking and the explosive power of gunpowder, traveled west. Think of it, the secret of making paper, a material that would revolutionize the recording and dissemination of knowledge, reached Samarkand in the 8th century, and from there, it spread into the Islamic world and eventually into Europe, laying the very groundwork for the Renaissance. And gunpowder, well, its journey across the Silk Road would forever reshape the nature of warfare. From the West, too, came new ideas. Imagine the intricate glasswork from the Roman Empire, so delicate and luminous, making its way eastward, inspiring artisans and fascinating emperors. Even medical knowledge, astronomical observations, and philosophical treatises found their way into new cultures, enriching the intellectual landscape of every civilization touched by these ancient thoroughfares. The Silk Road, in its quiet way, fostered a ceaseless dialogue, a symphony of exchange that echoed across millennia. Faith across continents. Indeed, when we delve deeper into the historical chronicles, the Silk Road was never just a singular path, but rather a sprawling, intricate network of interconnected routes. Imagine, if you will, a vast ancient tapestry, its threads stretching across continents, weaving together distinct civilizations. This grand design of pathways, born around 130 BC during the venerable Han Dynasty in China, wasn't merely for physical goods. Oh no. It became a vibrant artery for the very flow of ideas, of cultural practices, and even of the profound tenets of religion itself. You see, the movement of merchants and travelers, those intrepid souls venturing into unknown lands, carried with them more than just silks and spices. They bore knowledge, traditions, and even the revolutionary breakthroughs of their time. Consider the art of papermaking, for instance, or the astonishing power of gunpowder from China. These weren't just commodities for trade, they were catalysts for change, quietly revolutionizing societies as they spread. Or recall the gentle diffusion of Buddhism, traveling from India, finding fertile ground in Central Asia, and eventually gracing the landscapes of China. This wasn't merely an exchange of dogma, but a profound melding of philosophical ideas, leading to new ways of thinking and seeing the world. Now, beyond the cultural and philosophical, this bustling interchange also spurred scientific and technological progress. It fostered the spread of inventions like the compass, guiding sailors across uncharted waters, and the technology of printing, which would, in time, democratize knowledge itself. Medical wisdom, astronomical observations. All these forms of learning flowed, enriching disparate communities and accelerating the twin engines of science and technology. It was as if the human mind, given the freedom to wander and connect, flourished in unforeseen ways. Here's what's truly remarkable. Even though the prominence of these overland routes eventually waned with the advent of maritime trade, the Silk Road left an indelible mark. Its legacy, much like an ancient riverbed, laid the foundational currents for centuries of international commerce and profound cultural interaction. That enduring spirit of cooperation, of understanding that arises from shared journeys and mutual benefit. It echoes still, finding new life in modern endeavors to rekindle those ancient paths. It stands as a testament, does it not, to the enduring power of trade in shaping our global tapestry, quietly connecting continents and cultures across the vastness of time. Invaders' new routes. Indeed, much like a grand tapestry woven by countless hands across centuries, the Silk Road was never a single, immutable path. You see, the German geographer Ferdinand von Richthofen, when he coined the term Silk Road in 1877, was perhaps thinking of a more singular thread. Yet history, in its quiet unfolding, often reveals a far more intricate pattern. It was in truth an interconnected web of arteries, both land and sea, constantly shifting, adapting, and expanding. The ancient Chinese capital of Chang'an, or even Luoyang, these terrestrial routes would meander through Kashgar, Samarkand, and Baghdad, ultimately reaching the mercantile ports of the Black Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean. But the complete story, also includes the maritime passages stretching from China across the South China Sea, through the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean and onward to distant Basra or Suez. what's particularly fascinating is how this network was perpetually in flux. It wasn't laid down once and for all, but rather lived and breathed with the rise and fall of empires, the whims of political tides, and even the caprices of nature itself. Imagine, if you will, the challenges faced by those ancient voyagers. Bandits lurked in arid passes, political shifts could render a safe route treacherous overnight, and the fickle weather, from sandstorms in the desert to blizzards in the mountains, posed constant threats. And then there was the unseen enemy, disease. The Silk Road, sadly, facilitated not only the exchange of wondrous materials, but also the silent, often devastating, journey of pathogens. Recent archaeological discoveries, for instance at the Xunquanji relay station, have unearthed evidence of parasite eggs, roundworm, whipworm, tapeworm, liver fluke within desiccated human remains. A stark, quiet reminder, isn't it, of the biological cost of ancient globalization. Initially, much of the trade here was conducted through simple barter, goods for goods. Yet, as the arteries of commerce grew more sophisticated, so too did the systems of exchange. Coins emerged as a standardized medium, the silver dram of Sasanian Persia and the golden solidus of the Byzantine Empire becoming widely accepted currencies. Chinese bronze coins, while present, had a more limited circulation, and in a remarkable leap forward, the Mongols, during their vast dominion, were among the first to introduce the concept of paper money. A testament to their innovative spirit, perhaps, but who were the masterful orchestrators of this intricate commercial dance? You might be surprised to learn that the Sogdians, these ingenious merchants from Central Asia, played a truly pivotal role. Indeed, their language became something of a lingua franca across the Silk Road. Beyond mere trade, they were translators, entertainers, skilled horse breeders, and vital conduits for the transmission of ideas, carrying not just silks and spices, but also the profound philosophies of Buddhism and the ancient tenets of Zoroastrianism across immense distances, setting the stage, wouldn't you say, for the footsteps of wanderers like Marco Polo. Marco Polo's footsteps. The spread of diseases, too, became an unfortunate, yet undeniable, part of this vast interchange. Imagine, if you will, the merchant perhaps unknowingly carrying a microscopic passenger from one distant land to another. Archaeological findings, for instance at places like the Xunquanji relay station, have unearthed evidence of parasite eggs, human roundworm, whipworm, tapeworm, even liver flukes, embedded in the ancient soil. This silent testimony reminds us that the Silk Road, while connecting cultures and economies, also inadvertently facilitated the long-distance travel of illnesses, profoundly impacting populations along its routes. Now you might be thinking, with all these incredible movements of goods, ideas, and even maladies, how was such an intricate system managed? Much of the early trade, particularly in the nascent phases of the Silk Road around the 1st century BCE, operated on a system of barter, goods for goods, a simple, direct exchange. Yet, as the volume and complexity of trade grew, this gave way to more sophisticated monetary systems. Indeed, the glimmer of silver from the Sasanian Persian drams and the golden resilience of the Byzantine solidus became dominant currencies, flowing through the hands of countless merchants. Chinese bronze coins, though present, often had a more limited circulation beyond their immediate borders. What's particularly fascinating is how the Mongol Empire, during its vast reign, introduced something revolutionary, something we still use today, paper money. It was perhaps one of the earliest widespread adoptions of fiat currency, a testament to their administrative ingenuity in managing such a colossal network. But who were the master orchestrators of this intricate commercial ballet? The Sogdians, these remarkable traders from Central Asia, emerged from the dust of history as perhaps the most effective merchants of their time. Their language became a kind of lingua franca of the Silk Road, a common tongue understood across diverse lands. Beyond mere commerce, the Sogdians were also great conduits of culture. They served as translators, entertainers, and even experts in horse breeding, facilitating the exchange of not only material goods, but also profound intellectual and spiritual traditions. They were instrumental, for instance, in the westward flow of various ideas, including the early Buddhist texts and the ancient, dualistic beliefs of Zoroastrianism. It was through their tireless journeys, their caravanserai stops, and their persistent diplomacy that these diverse threads of human experience were woven into the grand tapestry of the Silk Road. You see, the movement was never merely about the physical objects, the silk, the spices, the porcelain, but equally about the intangible, the beliefs, the knowledge, the very spirit of human endeavor that traveled alongside them. Lost roads rediscovered. Now we have explored the journey of Marco Polo, a man whose tales ignited the European imagination. Yet, as with all grand narratives, there is often a shadow lurking just beyond the light. a stark reminder of the unintended consequences that frequently accompany progress and connection. And so, we turn our gaze to a darker chapter in the story of the Silk Road, the haunting specter of the Black Death. You see, the very pathways that facilitated the exchange of precious silks, fragrant spices, and profound philosophies also became unwitting highways for something far more sinister. The Silk Road, this grand artery of interaction, was not merely a conduit for goods and ideas, it was also a vector for pestilence. Think of it this way: when you invite many guests into your home, you welcome both their joy and perhaps their ailments. The vast network of trade routes stretching across continents meant that diseases, once localized, could now travel with astonishing speed and devastating efficiency. One of the most profound and catastrophic instances of this was, of course, the Black Death. This terrible plague, primarily bubonic plague, began its terrifying journey somewhere in Central Asia, carried by fleas on rodents and then by those very rodents perhaps stowing away in merchant caravans. The disease spread with relentless inevitability. Imagine, if you will, the bustling caravans laden with treasures, unknowingly harboring this invisible, deadly cargo. Each stop along the route, each teeming city, each vibrant market became a new breeding ground, a new point of departure for the sickness. The archaeological evidence, even now, paints a stark picture. Studies of relay stations along the Silk Road have revealed the presence of parasite eggs, historical proof of how closely humans and their illnesses traveled. We're talking about things like roundworm, whipworm, and even the Chinese liver fluke. This silent testimony from centuries past confirms that the very intimacy of trade, the close quarters of merchants and their animals, the shared waters and lodgings, created the perfect conditions for pathogens to thrive and to spread across immense distances. The plague, in essence, was simply another, albeit horrific, item on the Silk Road's unwritten manifest. What's particularly chilling is the sheer scale and speed of its transmission. From Central Asia, the plague moved westward, swiftly reaching the Middle East and Europe by the mid-14th century. Estimates suggest that between 1347 and 1351 alone, it wiped out an unimaginable percentage of the population, perhaps a third of Europe, along with millions across Asia and Africa. The interconnectedness that the Silk Road fostered, bringing prosperity and cultural richness, also brought unimaginable suffering. The threads of trade, so carefully spun, also wove a shroud across civilizations. The irony, you see, is that the very success of the Silk Road, its magnificent ability to bring distant worlds together, inadvertently facilitated one of humanity's greatest catastrophes. It reminds us that every advance, every moment of profound connection carries with it an inherent vulnerability. The grand tapestry of history, like life itself, is woven with both light and shadow. The Black Death's shadow. The very mention of textiles, you see, conjures images of delicate threads woven with care, dyes that once fetched fortunes across vast distances, and clothing that marked status and identity. And on the Silk Road, these fabrics were not merely everyday items. They were a language all their own. Indeed, while silk from China was the undisputed monarch of these trade routes, incredibly light, durable, and immensely valuable, sometimes even serving as currency or diplomatic tribute, it was hardly the only woven wonder traveling across continents. Imagine, if you will, the sheer astonishment of the Chinese upon encountering the rich, warm wools from Central Asia, fabrics crafted with methods entirely unknown to them. These were not just practical garments for colder climes, they were tapestries, carpets, and blankets bearing intricate patterns that spoke of entirely different cultures and artistic traditions. Think of the Parthian tapestries, for instance. Their vibrant hues and complex designs making a profound impression, inspiring new aesthetics and techniques far from their origin. From India we find cotton, a fabric that would eventually weave its way into the very cloth of daily life across the globe. Initially, this versatile fiber flowed along the Silk Road, transforming diets, fashion, and even agricultural practices as it was adapted in new lands. And then there were the specialized textiles, the intricate brocades, the fine linens, and the embroidery, each a testament to centuries of accumulated skill and artistry. These weren't simply traded for their utility, they were pieces of portable art, carrying stories, symbols, and innovations from one civilization to another. What this meant for the societies along the route was a constant, gentle evolution of taste and technique. A design originating in Persia might inspire a weaver in Samarkand, who then might integrate a motif from a Chinese silk pattern into their own work. The threads of trade, you see, were also the threads of cultural exchange, creating a rich, interconnected tapestry of human endeavor. It suggests how profoundly these quiet, everyday objects could influence an entire world, long before our modern notions of globalization. Secrets of textile weaving. Indeed, the invisible threads of connectivity that the Silk Road wove across continents also had a darker, more insidious side. While goods and ideas flowed, so too did something far less welcome: disease. You see, the very pathways that brought prosperity and cultural exchange also became conduits for pathogens, forever altering human history. Think of it as the grand tapestry of human interaction, where every thread, every connection, no matter how distant, carried both the blessings and the burdens of encounter. It was in this interconnected world, paradoxically forged by the desire for exotic goods, that the devastating shadow of the Black Death began to stretch across the land. The sheer volume of people and goods moving across vast distances, through bustling caravan cities and remote outposts, provided an unprecedented opportunity for diseases to travel. Imagine, if you will, the tiny unseen passengers hitching rides on silks, spices, and even the very breath of a traveler from a distant land. The Black Death, a pandemic that reached its terrifying peak between 1347 and 1351, is perhaps the most stark and chilling example of this phenomenon. It's believed to have originated in Central Asia, a crossroads of many Silk Road routes, and from there it spread with frightening speed. Along those well-worn paths carried by merchants and soldiers, by fleas on rats that nested in their cargo, the plague made its relentless journey. It reminds us that commerce in its rawest form is an indifferent force. It merely moves what is movable, whether it be a precious gem, a revolutionary idea, or a microscopic killer. The fortified cities, once beacons of trade and culture, became potential epicenters for contagion, where unsuspecting populations met an invisible enemy. What happened during the Black Death was a profound lesson in the unintended consequences of global connectivity. It forced societies to confront new challenges, to innovate in areas of public health, and forever changed demographic landscapes. Even the concept of quarantine, which still echoes in our modern world, has its roots in those desperate attempts to contain the spread of such a potent, unseen foe. Glass, a fragile dream. Now we have spoken of textiles, the woven wonders that traveled great distances, yet there was another humble material, far less glamorous perhaps than silk or velvet, but infinitely more revolutionary in its impact. And that, my friends, is paper. This seemingly simple invention, born into existence in ancient China, began its quiet journey westward along the very same paths we have been tracing. Before its arrival, knowledge was a heavy burden, etched in stone, pressed onto clay tablets, or painted on fragile scrolls of papyrus or costly parchment. Imagine, if you will, the sheer effort involved in creating and transporting even a single book. Each word was a monumental undertaking. Paper changed everything. Its lightness, its comparative ease of manufacture, and its ability to absorb ink meant that ideas could now travel with unprecedented speed and volume. What this meant is that sacred texts, scientific observations, philosophical treatises, and administrative records could be copied, disseminated, and stored with far greater efficiency. It wasn't just about making books, it was about democratizing information. Consider this: when paper reached Samarkand in the 8th century, largely through the capture of Chinese papermakers, it sparked a quiet revolution in the Islamic world. Libraries flourished, scholars copied and translated ancient Greek texts, and new scientific discoveries were recorded and shared. This flow of knowledge laid crucial foundations for Europe's own intellectual awakening centuries later. It's a compelling testament to how a single innovation, a mere shift in material, can reshape the entire intellectual landscape of civilizations. The movement of paper, you see, was often intertwined with the spread of new faiths. Buddhist monasteries, for instance, became centers for translation and copying, helping to preserve and transmit their teachings on this new, versatile medium. It allowed for the creation of vast collections of sutras and commentaries, contributing immensely to the intellectual and spiritual fabric of those distant lands. And so, the very act of writing, the preservation of thought, became more accessible, more widespread, allowing human inquiry to deepen and to reach further than ever before. Paper knowledge unfolds. From the delicate artistry of glass, we now turn our gaze to a different kind of treasure, something that traveled far across those same routes, imbued with its own mystic qualities and deeply altering cultures wherever it landed. I speak, of course, of the humble yet profound leaf of tea. Imagine, if you will, the early days long before tea became a global phenomenon. For centuries, it remained a closely guarded secret, a medicinal brew in ancient China, perhaps even a ceremonial drink. What's interesting is how it transformed from a local plant into a commodity that would eventually shape societies, influence economies, and even spark wars across continents. You see, much like silk, tea began its journey as an exclusive item, destined perhaps only for the imperial courts or the contemplative minds of monks. but here where the Silk Road, and its various branches, played a subtle yet pivotal role. While not always the primary large-scale transport for something as bulky as tea, the very network of commerce and cultural exchange created the pathways for its initial spread. Monks and travelers moving along those ancient trails carried not just written scrolls and philosophical ideas, but also their customs, including the brewing and consumption of tea. It was through these quiet personal exchanges that knowledge of tea first began to seep beyond China's borders. Consider the geography. From the verdant hills of China, tea moved northwest into Tibet and Mongolia. For these nomadic peoples living in harsh, cold climates, tea became far more than just a beverage. It was a vital source of warmth and sometimes even nutrition. Often mixed with yak butter or salt, it morphed into a robust, sustaining drink, perfectly suited to their demanding lifestyles. What this means is tea didn't just passively travel, it adapted, integrating deeply into the local customs and palates, creating, in a sense, new forms of tea culture wherever it took root. This movement northward also hints at the resilience of the Silk Road. Even as certain grand routes might have waxed and waned in importance, the smaller tributaries of trade and personal journeys continued. The demand for tea, once established, provided yet another reason for caravans to cross the vast steppes and mountains, delivering these precious leaves to eager populations. It was, in essence, another thread woven into the already rich tapestry of the Silk Road's commerce, proving that it was never solely about the grand, luxurious items like silk, but also about items that profoundly touched daily life. Tea's gentle embrace. From the quiet patience of papermaking, we now turn our gaze to something equally profound in its ability to shape civilizations, the silent language of precious gems. You see, long before the elaborate financial systems we know today, the glittering fragments of the earth held immense power not merely for their beauty, but as concentrated wealth, symbols of status, and conduits of connection across vast distances. Imagine, if you will, the early merchant, perhaps journeying from the mines of distant lands. He couldn't carry mountains of grain or herds of cattle across the harsh deserts and towering peaks of the ancient world, but a handful of shimmering stones, a sapphire, a ruby, an emerald, these could represent a fortune. They were light, imperishable, and universally understood as valuable. Perhaps this is why they resonated so deeply with human aspiration. The desire for something rare, something perfected by the slow, patient hand of time itself. Now the sources of these gems were often shrouded in legend, adding to their allure. Lapis lazuli, with its deep, celestial blue speckled with gold, emerged from the distant mountains of what is now Afghanistan. It found its way to the pharaohs of Egypt, to the palaces of Mesopotamia, and later, across the breadth of the Silk Road to the workshops of China. Each tiny fleck of pyrite within the stone seems to tell a story of immense journeys, of countless hands through which it passed, whispered from one tongue to another. And then there was jade, primarily sourced from the sacred rivers and mountains of Khotan in Central Asia. For the Chinese, jade was more than a stone. It was a symbol of purity, wisdom, and heavenly power. Its cool, smooth touch, its enduring strength, spoke of virtues that transcended mere material value. The trade in jade was not simply an exchange of goods. It was a sharing of spiritual significance, a profound cultural conversation carried on the backs of camels and across treacherous passes. Think of the turquoise from Persia, a stone that mirrors the clear, endless skies of the steppe, or the rubies from distant Burma, glowing with an inner fire forged deep within the earth. These treasures were not merely admired, they were imbued with meaning, believed to possess protective qualities or to signify divine favor. A merchant carrying these might not only be transporting wealth, but also hopes and beliefs. Each uncut stone was a secret waiting to be revealed, a hidden story eager to unfold in a distant land under a different sun. Precious gems, hidden stories. Tea, a humble leaf, might seem to be an unassuming traveler along these ancient paths. Yet its story, too, weaves through the tapestry of the Silk Road, transforming diets and cultures across vast distances. Originating in China, as you might recall, tea began its slow, steady journey westward, carrying with it not just its flavor, but a whole philosophy of consumption. What's particularly interesting about tea's spread is how it adapted to every climate and culture it encountered. In Tibet and Mongolia, where fresh vegetables could be scarce, brick tea became an essential daily staple, often mixed with yak butter and salt. It wasn't just a beverage, it was nourishment, a warm, vital sustenance in harsh, unforgiving landscapes. Imagine those nomadic herders gathered around a fire sipping this rich, warming concoction after a long day in the saddle. It truly paints a picture of survival and comfort, doesn't it? The demand for tea also fueled new forms of trade and even created its own dedicated routes, often branching off the main Silk Road arteries. These were sometimes called tea horse roads, especially in the mountainous regions connecting Yunnan and Sichuan with Tibet. Here, tea was traded for horses, powerful, sturdy steeds vital for military might and transportation across these very same trade networks. It was a symbiotic exchange where one commodity nourished bodies and the other literally carried empires forward. But tea's influence didn't stop there. As it traveled through Central Asia, it slowly made its way towards the Middle East and eventually Europe. Along the way, it inspired new rituals, new forms of pottery, and even new social customs. Consider the rise of the elaborate tea ceremonies in Japan, or the very British afternoon tea ritual. All born from that single ancient Chinese leaf, it speaks volumes, doesn't it, about how deeply a simple product can embed itself into the fabric of human society. The methods of preparing and enjoying tea diversified as well, from the highly ceremonial whisked matcha in some cultures to the steeped leaves in a pot or even the spiced chai blends of India, each variation a testament to the cultural dialogues happening along these pathways. The story of tea on the Silk Road is a quiet echo of the grand narrative, a subtle reminder that even the smallest items can carry the grandest transformations across continents and through centuries. Cultural threads connect. Precious gems we were just discussing, these vibrant fragments of the Earth's own history, tracing their journeys along the Silk Road, and indeed they traveled far and wide. Yet the story of this ancient network extends far beyond these glittering treasures, doesn't it? Imagine the Silk Road not as a single dusty path, but as a vast, intricate tapestry of routes, woven across mountains, deserts, and seas. It was a dynamic web, constantly shifting and evolving from roughly the 2nd century before the Common Era, all the way to the 15th century, giving way, eventually, to the burgeoning age of maritime exploration. The very term Silk Road, you see, is itself a relatively modern invention. It was coined by a discerning German geographer, Ferdinand von Richthofen, in 1877. He recognized perhaps the poetic resonance of silk, that luxurious gossamer thread, as a symbol for this sprawling network of trade. But it was always more than a path for cloth. From the ancient Chinese capital of Chang'an, or Xi'an as it's known today, these land routes stretched west. Through bustling cities like Kashgar, Samarkand, and then onward to Baghdad. From there they branched off toward the port cities of the Black Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean. And simultaneously, an equally vital maritime Silk Road connected China through the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean, reaching Basra or Suez. Now, these journeys were never simple. Think of the intrepid merchants and travelers, braving the ever-present threats of bandits, the unpredictable whims of political change, the harsh vagaries of weather, and sadly, disease. It's why so many of the towns and caravanserai, those roadside inns, if you will, along these routes were meticulously fortified. They were safe havens, vital breathing spaces in a perilous world. Initially, much of the trade on the Silk Road was a matter of simple barter, a direct exchange of goods. But as civilizations grew more sophisticated, so too did the methods of commerce. Precious metals like the silver drams of Sasanian Persia and the golden solidus of the Byzantine Empire became the de facto currencies along the route, though intriguingly, Chinese bronze coins saw limited use. It was the Mongol Empire in their vast dominion who first introduced the concept of paper money to this network. A truly revolutionary idea, and amidst these movements of goods and coin there were the people, the true arteries of this system. The Sogdians, these remarkable merchants from Central Asia, were perhaps the most skilled and enduring traders. Their language, Sogdian, became the lingua franca, the common tongue of the Silk Road. They weren't merely transporters of goods, they were translators, entertainers, even horse breeders. And crucially, they were conduits for ideas, carrying with them everything from Buddhist texts to the ancient wisdom of Zoroastrianism. So you see, the Silk Road was a profound channel of cultural communication. It was how innovative technologies like paper, printing, and gunpowder made their way across continents. It was how art flourished, how beliefs such as Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and Manichaeism took root in new lands. But and here's a sobering thought, it was also how diseases traveled. Consider the findings at the Xuankwanji relay station. Archaeological evidence of parasite eggs, suggesting that these great routes of connection also facilitated the silent, unseen spread of illness. A testament perhaps to the complex and often unforeseen consequences of global interconnection. Indeed, the Silk Road was a monument to human ingenuity and resilience, a testament to the enduring power of exchange to shape our world. And it continues to echo in our modern era, doesn't it? A quiet whisper from the past, reminding us of the profound truth that sometimes the threads that bind us are stronger than the distances that separate. Beyond silk, new cargoes. Now, as we near the end of our journey through the ancient trade routes, it's worth pausing to consider the sheer ingenuity involved in keeping these vast networks alive for so many centuries. Imagine, if you will, the challenges, the bandits lurking in the shadows, the treacherous mountain passes, the vast, unforgiving deserts. Political instability, too, was a constant threat as empires rose and fell along the path of trade. Yet the Silk Road endured. What sustained it, you might wonder? Well, it was a combination of cunning strategy and sheer human determination. Many of the cities and caravanserai, those roadside inns for travelers, were fortified, offering a measure of safety and respite. Think of them as beacons in the wilderness, drawing merchants and their precious cargo towards them. These strongholds provided not only protection but also essential services: fresh water, food, and a place for tired animals and weary souls to rest. Early on, much of the trade was conducted through simple bartering, a direct exchange of goods for goods. A camel full of silk from China might be swapped for a caravan laden with spices from India. But as commerce grew more sophisticated, the need for a standardized medium of exchange became clear. Currencies began to emerge, with the silver dram of Sasanian Persia and the golden solidus of the Byzantine Empire becoming widely accepted. These coins were the universal language of the marketplace, enabling transactions across vast cultural divides. Interestingly, even though the Chinese invented paper money, its circulation along the broader Silk Road was rather limited at first. Among the most effective and pervasive merchants were the Sogdians of Central Asia. Their language, Sogdian, became something of a lingua franca along the Silk Road, a common tongue that facilitated communication between diverse peoples. They were not just traders, they were cultural intermediaries, translating texts, providing entertainment, and even breeding the famed horses that were so crucial for travel and warfare. Indeed, the Sogdians were instrumental in the movement of ideas, from Buddhist scriptures to the ancient Zoroastrian traditions. But this exchange, you see, was not without its darker side. The very routes that carried silks and spices also carried something far more insidious. Archaeological work, such as at the Chungquanji relay station, has revealed the presence of parasite eggs from roundworms, whipworms, even liver flukes. This sobering evidence tells us that with every caravan, every ship, and every traveler, diseases moved across continents. The Silk Road, sadly, facilitated the rapid spread of illnesses, sometimes with devastating consequences, much like the Black Death we spoke of earlier, proving that even great networks of connection have their vulnerabilities. Echoes of ancient trade. Now the story of the Silk Road isn't just about silks and spices, or even the grand empires that rose and fell along its vast expanse. It is also a story of unseen cargo, of those things that traveled without being packed onto a camel's back or stowed in the hull of a ship. I speak, of course, of ideas, of knowledge, and regrettably of ailments. Think of the compass, that marvelous invention from China, which perhaps 1,000 years before Christ charted courses across treacherous waters. It was not a physical good exchanged for gold, but rather the ingenious principle that traveled. Imagine, if you will, the slow journey of this knowledge from a Chinese inventor's workshop across the steppes, filtering into the minds of Arab sailors and eventually guiding European explorers to new worlds. The compass itself may have been a simple needle, but the idea it represented, the concept asterisk of navigation, transformed seafaring forever. Then there is paper. A Chinese invention from the 2nd century, whose journey westernwards truly highlights the Silk Road's quiet power. Arrived in Samarkand in the 8th century, carried by skilled Chinese craftsmen, perhaps taken captive during skirmishes. From there it spread to the Islamic world, where great centers of learning like Baghdad embraced it, establishing the first paper mills. And in time, by the 12th and 13th centuries, this revolutionary medium reached Europe. It wasn't a king's ransom, yet its arrival paved the way for the printing press, which in turn sparked revolutions in knowledge and literacy. Without paper, much of what we consider modern thought simply couldn't have unfurled at the pace it did. But not all transfers were beneficial, you see. The same intricate web that carried silks and enlightenment also inadvertently carried less welcome passengers. Diseases, for example. Consider the Black Death in the 14th century. While its exact origins are still debated, its devastating journey across continents was undeniably facilitated by these very trade routes. The bustling caravan cities, the crowded trading posts, the ships docking in busy ports. They became unwitting conduits for pathogens, tracing the lines of human commerce across Eurasia. It is a stark reminder that every connection, every bridge built between cultures, carries with it both promise and peril. This exchange, both celebrated and lamented, speaks to the profound interconnectedness that the Silk Road fostered, a legacy that echoes in our globally connected world even today. The silent legacy. Now, as we near the quiet close of our journey along these ancient paths, it becomes clear that the Silk Road was far more than a mere collection of trade routes. It was rather a grand, intricate tapestry woven from threads of commerce, culture, and curiosity. A testament to humanity's enduring desire to connect, to understand, and to share. It didn't simply move goods, it moved ideas, dreams, and the very essence of progress across continents. Think of it from the humble silkworm in faraway China to the philosophical debates carried across the sands. Every interaction left its indelible mark. The exchange of innovations, for instance. Consider the seemingly simple paper born in China traveling slowly westward, transforming record-keeping, scholarship, and ultimately paving the way for the printing press in Europe. Or indeed gunpowder, a Chinese invention, reshaping warfare across the globe. These weren't isolated events, they were pulses within a vast living network echoing through generations, and the compass. That small yet profoundly impactful instrument, which would eventually guide mariners across oceans, leading to new routes and, perchance, the gentle decline of the great overland paths. But the legacy isn't merely found in technological marvels. It's in the quiet fusion of cultures, the subtle blending of artistic styles, the philosophical dialogues exchanged in bustling caravanserais. Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism all found new homes and new interpretations along these very routes, carried not by armies but by the soft footsteps of pilgrims and merchants. This cultural exchange wasn't always seamless, of course, but it inevitably enriched the human experience in ways we're still, perhaps, only beginning to fully appreciate. Even today in our modern world we find echoes of the Silk Road's influence, in the flavors on our plates, the fabrics we wear, and indeed in the very structure of global trade. The idea of interconnectedness, of distant lands influencing one another, was solidified by these ancient roots. They taught us that what happens in one corner of the world can, eventually, touch every other. It was a lesson in interdependence, whispered across vast distances, reminding us that we are all, in a fundamental way, connected. And in this understanding, perchance, lies a certain serenity, does it not, that even in the deepest slumber the world turns and its threads remain intertwined. World connected, asleep. The echoes of the Silk Road, you see, resonate far beyond the ancient caravan trails. Its legacy isn't merely found in dusty ledger books or fragmented pottery, but in the very fabric of our modern interconnected world. Imagine, if you will, the spirit of that ancient exchange, the ceaseless flow of goods, ideas, and cultures, reimagined for a new age. This, in essence, is what we see unfolding today. One might consider the modern phenomenon of globalization a direct descendant, a vast river flowing from those smaller streams we've explored. The fundamental principles remain: the desire for distant goods, the sharing of knowledge, and the forging of connections across vast geographies. Indeed, initiatives like the Belt and Road, a contemporary vision for revitalizing trade routes, draw inspiration directly from the Silk Road's grand tapestry. It's a testament to the enduring power of these connections, to bridge continents, to intertwine economies, and sometimes to rediscover shared histories. Yet the Silk Road's influence extends subtly into corners you might not initially perceive. Think of our daily comforts, the spices that flavor our meals, the silks that adorn our wardrobes, even the porcelain gracing our tables. These were once exotic treasures, journeying thousands of miles, shaping tastes and demands across civilizations. The continuous evolution of trade routes from land to sea and now through digital networks speaks to a human constant, the insatiable curiosity and ingenuity to seek, to connect, and to exchange. Each innovation in transport, each leap in communication, is but a new chapter in a story that began with a caravan traversing a desert. And so, as we reflect upon this ancient network, we come to understand that its greatest lesson is perhaps one of perspective. The world, even in its vastness, has always found ways to connect. Cultures have always mingled, technologies have always spread, and people, despite their differences, have always sought common ground in trade and understanding. The challenges of banditry on ancient trails, you see, have transformed into the complexities of modern logistics and tariffs. But the underlying human impulse to connect and exchange remains. What this means is, the Silk Road was not merely a historical curiosity, but a foundational blueprint for how civilizations interact, evolve, and prosper through mutual exchange. Its story reminds us that every modern convenience, every globalized product, every shared idea, carries with it the faint whispers of those ancient journeys. It's a gentle reminder that the currents of history, once set in motion, continue to shape our present and perhaps our very distant future. Sweet dreams, world. The echoes of the Silk Road, they whisper to us still, don't they? This ancient network of pathways stretching across continents didn't just connect east and west with goods like silk and spices. It wove together cultures, exchanged ideas, and shaped the very fabric of human civilization in ways we are only now, perhaps, beginning to fully appreciate. Take the humble paper, for instance, a Chinese invention that, after centuries of slow travel along these routes, revolutionized literacy and learning across the Islamic world and eventually, Europe. Or the compass, another marvel from the distant East that utterly transformed exploration and trade, paradoxically contributing to the eventual decline of the very land routes that brought it west. And consider the spread of faiths, Buddhism unfolding from India into vast stretches of Asia, or the teachings of Islam traveling with merchants and scholars, planting new seeds of devotion and wisdom across diverse lands. Even the dark shadows of history, like the Black Death, owe their terrifying reach to the interconnectedness fostered by these paths. What began as a local affliction traversed vast distances, carried along by the very arteries of trade, reminding us that with connection comes both immense profit and profound peril. Yet from such devastation often arose new understandings of public health, such as the practice of quarantine, a concept born from necessity, now deeply embedded in our collective memory. The Silk Road, in its expansive journey through time, reveals to us a timeless truth, that humanity's progress is rarely a solitary endeavor. It is a grand, intricate dance of innovation, adaptation, and exchange, where every caravanserai, every port, every dusty footprint left a mark on the tapestry of our shared human story. And so we draw to a close our journey along these fabled routes. We've seen how the quest for knowledge, for beauty, for resources, propelled our ancestors across intimidating landscapes, creating a world far more connected than they could ever have imagined. It is a story of enduring lessons, gentle reminders that the threads of commerce and culture, once spun, are rarely truly broken, merely rewoven into new patterns over the vast stretches of time. Thank you for joining me on this exploration into the quiet history of a world connected. I truly hope you found a moment of peace and perhaps a deeper understanding of the subtle forces that shape our existence. If you enjoyed this journey, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel for more gentle lessons from the past. You'll find other stories waiting in this series and many more to come. Until next time, may your dreams be gentle and your rest be deep.